What if I told you the modern classroom was quietly nuked, rebuilt in code, and then politely asked to raise its hand? Welcome to Unboxd Origins. I'm Howie, your resident science geek and accidental trivia sponge.
And I'm Wyatt. I ask the big questions. Sometimes philosophical, often skeptical, always curious.
Today, we're digging into how did online learning transform education forever? Okay, strap in, because the story of online learning is one of snail mail epiphanies, lab-bound mainframes, late-night video uploads, and a global pandemic that acted like a turbocharger on everything that felt remotely educational. It begins in the 19th century, which is the most satisfying place to start anything that ends up on your smartphone. Back then, correspondence courses, literally sending lessons and homework through the post, let people learn shorthand, bookkeeping, and languages from afar. The University of London began an external degree program in 1858. It was a way to learn without being physically present, and for many, it was the first taste of education liberated from geography. These were low-tech, human-scale experiments in distance learning, but they planted the idea that education could travel. Fast forward to the early 20th century, and radio and television show up like flashy new learning assistants. Universities experimented with broadcasting lectures. Governments used radio for literacy campaigns. Public TV ran educational shows. Suddenly, learning could be simultaneously synchronous, a live broadcast, and massively distributed. Hundreds, even thousands, could tune in at once. Then, computers waltzed in. In the 1960s, the University of Illinois birthed Plato, a titan of early computer-based education. Plato had forums, message boards, real-time chat, and even multiplayer educational games, features we'd recognize in modern e-learning platforms. Plato and its cousins showed that computers could be more than number crunchers. They could shape learning experiences, track student progress, and let people learn interactively. The real accelerant was the internet and the web. In the 1990s, colleges began offering online courses, sometimes simply putting scanned syllabi online, sometimes building entire classes on fledgling learning management systems, LMS. Blackboard launched in 1997 and became a household name in higher ed. Not glamorous, but revolutionary. A single place to post lectures, grades, discussion boards. Around the same time, Khan Academy's humble roots, Salman Khan uploading math videos in 2006, and the rise of educational YouTube channels started democratizing content creation. Anyone with a webcam could be a teacher. Then came MOOCs in the 2010s, massive open online courses. Platforms like Coursera, Udacity, and edX offered free or low-cost classes from elite universities to tens of thousands of learners. The promise was audacious. World-class education for anyone with a browser. Institutions began to rethink the economics of teaching. New providers tested micro-credentials, certificates, and nano-degrees that unbundled the traditional diploma. And because technology is never content to only sprint, we got personalization, analytics, and adaptive learning. Software began tracking not just whether you finished a module, but how long you paused on a question, which hints you clicked, how you navigated the content. Algorithms suggested resources, adjusted difficulty, and flagged students for intervention. Mobile devices made learning asynchronous and on-demand. Lessons could happen on commutes, in coffee shops, while washing dishes if you're disciplined or forgetful, both work. Corporate training and HR departments embraced LMS tools for compliance and upskilling. Boot camps and online certificate programs offered fast, career-oriented alternatives to multi-year degrees. By the time the 2020s rolled around, online learning wasn't a novelty. It was an infrastructure quietly suturing education, employment, and entertainment.
Aha! And here's the twist nobody quite advertises. The biggest transformation wasn't the move from chalkboard to chatroom. It wasn't even the scale. It was the shift in who controls learning. For a century, authority in education was a triangular ritual: professor, curriculum, diploma. Online learning peeled back layers of that triangle. Suddenly, students could stitch together micro-courses from different providers, earn badges from industry groups, learn from peers in Reddit threads, and get coached by AI tutors. Learning authority became fragmented, and, in some ways, democratized. That's liberating, but also destabilizing. If the credential loses its monopoly, who certifies competence? If anyone can be a teacher, how do we pass quality from charisma? The technology allowed pedagogy to evolve, but it also disrupted the gatekeepers, sometimes with messy consequences.
Exactly, and that tension is everywhere. Take the pandemic, the blunt instrument that forced every school into online modes overnight. On one hand, the pandemic instantly normalized video conferencing classrooms. Zoom became a verb, schools adopted emergency online teaching, and families scaffolded whole routines around screens. On the other hand, it exposed the digital divide with brutal clarity. Not everyone had reliable internet, quiet study space, or parents able to supervise remote learning. The emergency revealed that access is not just a binary of available versus not available. It's about bandwidth, devices, digital literacy, and socioeconomic support. But even with uneven access, the cultural shift stuck. Many institutions discovered efficiencies and pedagogical possibilities they weren't ready to unsee. Flipped classrooms where video delivers content and in-person time does problem solving. Hybrid models that let students roam between modalities. Asynchronous forums that foster deeper reflection than a pressured 90-minute lecture. And here's another layer, the datafication of education. Online platforms generate traces of everything students do. Clicks, dwell time, problem patterns. This enables learning analytics and adaptive pathways that can tailor content to learners' strengths and weaknesses. But it also raises privacy questions and changes the teacher's role. Teachers can be coaches who interpret data and scaffold experiences rather than just deliver content. Employers and credentialing bodies can use analytics as evidence of competency. This has birthed new markets, proctoring services using AI to detect cheating, badge ecosystems that promise verifiable skills, and learning experience platforms designed to integrate learning with workflow. So the shape of education changed from a one-size-fits-all semester to an ecosystem of micro-moments, on-demand credentials, and continuous learning loops that hum alongside work.
Aha! And here's another overlooked contradiction. While online learning promised democratization, knowledge for all, it also fueled a new kind of prestige economy. The very platforms that expanded access partnered with elite universities. A Coursera certificate might be free to audit, but verified credentials often come with a price tag and brand signaling. Employers sometimes prefer candidates who completed X university's online certificate over equally competent, non-branded pathways. The internet lowered barriers to entry, yes, but it also created new badges of honor. So online learning both dissolves and recreates hierarchies. We mustn't romanticize it as purely leveling. It reproduces social dynamics in novel forms.
Yet the pedagogical innovations are real and durable. The flipped classroom model, where video handles content exposition and class time is used for active learning, takes classic constructivist ideas and gives them new life. Peer instruction and online discussion boards can heighten engagement. Project-based and competency-based education fits naturally with modular online courses. We've also seen employers accept shorter, targeted training as valid signals of ability. Coding boot camps and industry certificates can get someone a job faster than a 4-year degree might. That matters because it changes the lifetime trajectory of learning. Education is less a front-loaded rite of passage and more an ongoing cycle tied to career and curiosity. Lifelong learning becomes practical, not just aspirational. Another consequence is the globalization of classrooms. Students in Lagos can take a course from MIT. A teacher in rural Wales can host a webinar for learners in Sao Paulo. Cultural exchange becomes built into the learning experience, which forces adaptation in pedagogy, time zone sensitivity, subtitles and transcripts for accessibility, and culturally aware content design. And don't underestimate the creative explosion. Educators have become content creators, experimenting with storytelling, gamification, interactive simulations. We're seeing learning environments that look and feel more like games, theater, and social media blended together.
Aha! There it is again, the double-edged sword. Gamification and bite-sized learning increase motivation, but they also risk simplifying depth into points, badges, and dopamine hits. The question becomes, can we design online systems that cultivate deep thinking, not just habit loops? Because if education becomes optimized for engagement metrics alone, we might trade critical thinking for click-through rates. The balance is delicate. Tech affords new possibilities, but also pressures pedagogy toward what's measurable and monetizable.
So, why does all of this matter? First, online learning redefined access, not perfectly but irrevocably. It extended educational opportunities across time zones and class barriers, enabling self-directed learning at a scale previous eras couldn't imagine. Second, it reshaped institutions. Universities, schools, and employers must now consider blended models, lifelong training pipelines, and credentialing ecosystems that compete with or complement traditional degrees. Third, it transformed the teacher's role from lecturer to designer, coach, and data interpreter. And finally, it forced society to grapple with ethics and equity, questions about privacy, surveillance, the digital divide, and the commercialization of knowledge.
And on a philosophical level, online learning nudged us to reconsider what learning actually is. Is it accumulation of facts and a diploma? Is it demonstrated competence? Is it transformation of the self through mentorship and challenge? When learning is modular, asynchronous, globally distributed, and algorithmically tailored, the boundaries of school blur. Communities of learners can form around interest rather than age. Knowledge becomes something you access in moments rather than hoard. That shift influences identity, opportunity, and the very idea of what an education should accomplish.
So in short, online learning didn't simply digitize the lecture. It unbundled the classroom, democratized certain types of access, introduced powerful personalization, and reorganized the ecosystem of credentials and careers. It brought enormous promise and serious challenges: inequity, surveillance, and the risk of reducing learning to metrics. The pandemic accelerated changes we already saw coming. It did not invent them. Many of the tools and concepts predated 2020, but the world's rapid pivot made experimentation and adoption mainstream in a way that we persist.
Which is why the conversation now isn't just about platforms or bandwidth, but about values and design. How do we make online learning equitable? How do we protect learner privacy? How do we preserve depth and mentorship alongside scalability? The answers will emerge in policy, pedagogy, and product design. We'll need educators, technologists, philosophers, and communities to collaborate. Otherwise, we risk letting market incentives shape the future of learning without moral or civic input.
If you take one lesson from this origin story, it's that technology shifts possibilities, but humans choose what matters. Online learning offered tools, massive reach, personalization, asynchronous access, but educators and learners decide which of those tools serve curiosity, competence, and the common good. The transformation is permanent because we've rearranged the levers of who teaches, how we learn, and what counts as proof of skill. That's a structural change, not a fad.
And if you take a second lesson, it's that transformation is unsettled and ongoing. We're midway through a cultural experiment with profound consequences for social mobility, work, and civic life. Keep asking the questions and keep paying attention to who benefits, who's left behind, and how we can design systems that serve the many, not just the few.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history and consequences of online learning, give us a like, subscribe, and share this episode with curious friends.
So, did the classroom really vanish, or did it simply change its address from brick to bandwidth?